Hi, witches. I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the Something Scary podcast. Thank you so much for being here, whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Sometimes traditions that may seem harmless hide dark and deadly secrets. Familiar fun games and rituals can take a terrifying turn, and those who follow them face consequences they never expected. What begins as a simple custom quickly turns into a nightmare, revealing the true horrors that lie just beneath the normalcy of everyday life. First, not all love returns pure, followed by the deadly price of conformity. Finally, in our last story, what waits in the silence. Before we get to our stories, have you checked out our brand new Something Scary Patreon storyteller experience? Now you can dive even deeper into the eerie and mysterious with exclusive perks just for our storyteller fans. By joining this new Patreon tier, you'll unlock access to our monthly film club live stream with me, where we discuss horror movies chosen by you. After each live stream, you'll also get exclusive behind-the-scenes access with a Q&A to answer your burning questions. And we're going to have our first meeting very soon. But that's not all. Storyteller Experience members will also enjoy 20% discount on Something Scary merch and a chance to collaborate on our next spine-chilling story. Together, we'll create a terrifying tale that just might end up on the podcast. It's our way of saying thank you for being part of this amazing community and keeping the spooky spirit alive all year round. Don't miss out. Join the Something Scary Storyteller Experience today for even more chills and insider treats. Head to patreon.com/snarl to sign up now.
So, want to hear something scary?
Blood and ceremony. When someone you love dies, there's no bringing them back. Or is there? Like in this story inspired by Micko. Liza gripped her phone, staring blankly at the text message from her aunt. Stella's gone. Car accident. Instantaneous. The words swirled before her eyes, her pulse pounding. Only 3 months since they'd last seen each other. Just 3 months since Stella had whispered goodbye, her laughter trailing as they parted ways. Now that laughter echoed in Liza's ears like a mocking ghost. She booked the next flight home, trembling with the weight of the loss. The long plane ride was a blur of agonizing silence, with Liza trying to conceal her tears from those around her. Her whole body ached with grief, yet a strange chill ran down her spine, as if she were being watched. When she glanced up, she saw an elderly woman, weary and hunched, with a stare that seemed to bore into her soul. The woman's eyes gleamed, both piercing and unsettling, as if reading her pain. She shuffled over to sit beside Liza. The woman's wrinkled hands reached out, patting her own with an almost unnatural warmth. "You've lost someone dear to you, haven't you?" the old woman murmured. Liza didn't respond, but the woman's gaze held her, and she continued to talk to Liza with a sly smile twisting her thin lips. She told Liza she had a way to bring her back. Liza felt herself leaning closer, both horrified and hypnotized. The old woman's eyes sparkled with something dark, something that unsettled her deeply, yet Liza couldn't look away. The woman began to whisper about a ritual, an ancient spell with roots tangled in shadows and lore. Her voice was a chant, mesmerizing, pulling Liza deeper into the promise of Stella's return. Before the plane landed, the woman pressed a piece of paper into her hand. It was scribbled with strange symbols and instructions. "Remember, child," the woman rasped, her voice now dripping with a strange satisfaction. "Some things come back different." Liza barely noticed the warning. The thought of seeing Stella again was like a siren song, drowning out caution. She clutched the paper, not fully realizing how her pulse raced or that her fingers trembled as if charged with electricity. Back home, her aunt and uncle's house was steeped in sorrow. The atmosphere was thick, a haze of mourning hanging in every corner. But despite the heartbreak, an eerie thrill coursed through Liza's veins. She had a secret, a forbidden knowledge that might bring Stella back. That night, after everyone had fallen into a restless slumber, Liza crept into Stella's bedroom. now chillingly empty. She lit a single candle, watching its wavering glow cast long, uneasy shadows over the walls. She found an old photo of Stella from their last trip together, a candid shot of her cousin laughing, caught in a fleeting moment of joy. With a trembling hand, she traced a chalk circle on the floor as the woman had instructed, careful to mark it with symbols scrawled on the paper. The symbols looked harmless, just strange shapes and curves, but when she finished, something in the air changed. It was as if the room itself held its breath. Liza sat in the circle, clutching the photo, and began to chant. The words felt heavy, unfamiliar, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. But she pressed on, her voice rising, blending with the silence until the air itself seemed to pulse around her. The candle flickered, then went out. A sudden chill swept through the room, as if a door to somewhere cold and dark had opened just for her. Liza shivered, a growing dread tightening around her heart. But she didn't move. The room grew darker, almost suffocatingly so, the shadows thickening like an advancing fog. And then she saw her, Stella, standing just at the edge of the circle, her form barely distinguishable from the shadows. Stella? Liza's voice trembled, raw with desperation and disbelief. Stella stepped forward, her face partially hidden in the darkness, yet there was no mistaking her cousin's familiar silhouette. Relief surged through Liza, mingling with a strange unease, but something was wrong. Stella's gaze was hollow, her eyes darker than they'd ever been, glinting with an unsettling, almost predatory shine.
Liza?
Stella's voice was a whisper, laced with something ancient. Her lips parted in a smile, but it wasn't the warm, loving smile Liza knew. The smile was too wide, too sharp, stretching her features into something twisted, almost grotesque. A pulse of terror shot through Liza. She scrambled back, pressing against the chalk boundary, her heart hammering as Stella, or whatever wore Stella's face, moved closer, her movements strange, almost animalistic, like a hunter closing in on its prey.
Isn't this what you wanted, Liza?
Stella's voice was both soft and chilling, her words dripping with an otherworldly menace.
You wanted me back? Forever.
The last word lingered in the air, heavy, mocking like a curse. Liza's breathing quickened, panic overtaking her. She had to get out. She turned, ready to dash for the door, but her body wouldn't move. She felt a prickling cold spread over her, like icy fingers tightening around her limbs, rooting her in place. Her vision blurred, and she looked down, horrified to see dark, red stains blossoming across her shirt. Confusion washed over her, mingling with terror as warmth trickled down her back, thick and wet. Her fingers trembled as she touched the spreading stain, feeling the slickness of blood. But how?
Liza.
Stella's voice was a rasp now, filled with something wicked.
You wanted eternity with me, and now we'll have it.
The room spun as Liza felt herself weakening, slipping away. Her vision dimmed, narrowing until all she saw was Stella's face. No, the thing wearing her cousin's face, grinning down at her with a look of triumph, satisfaction in its cold, dark eyes. In the final moments before darkness claimed her, Liza screamed silently with regret. She wanted Stella back, but not like this. Not this twisted, dark mockery of her cousin, a thing that had crawled back from the depths only to drag her down with it. When Liza's family finally found her the next morning, she lay cold and lifeless within the circle, her face contorted in terror. The chalk symbols seemed to pulse with an unnatural darkness, the once familiar room now carrying an inexplicable chill. No one could explain the strange markings on the floor or the haunting smile etched into Liza's pale face. In the weeks that followed, her family noticed something eerie. In the corners of mirrors and brief flickers of shadow, they could sometimes see two figures, a young woman with wide, hollow eyes, and beside her, another form, shadowy and twisted. And sometimes, just sometimes, a whisper would echo through the empty halls, a voice that sounded like Stella's but laced with a sinister glee. Liza had her eternity with her cousin, but as she had learned too late, forever could be the cruelest curse of all. What would you do if you were given the chance to bring back someone you lost, even if it came with serious risks? Have you ever been successful? Tell us your stories by sending us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com, and you might make it on the podcast. Sometimes the darkest truths are hidden in the quaintest towns, like in this adapted short story, The Lottery, written by Shirley Jackson. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square around 10 o'clock, located between the post office and the bank. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26. But in this village, with only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours, so it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for midday dinner. The children assembled first, of course. They tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking among themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys, and the very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. Soon, the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together, away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the whole village was assembled in the square, and Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic duties, arrived, carrying the black wooden box. He had a round, jovial face and ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him because he had no children and his wife was a scold, a constant complainer. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, and the Halloween program by Mr. Summers, who had no time for everything. The black box was not the original box, but was no less revered. Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new box, but no one liked to upset tradition. So the battered old box was put away each year until the lottery came around again. The villagers kept their distance from the box, and when Mr. Summers asked if any of them wanted to give him a hand, there was hesitation. Finally, Mr. Martin and his oldest son, Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred the papers inside. The lottery was, in the beginning, conducted with a chant that had been lost over the years, and the ritual salute, also long forgotten. Mr. Summers had replaced the original wooden chips with slips of paper to accommodate the population growth. He cleared his throat and called to the villagers, reminding them, "Let's get this over with so we can go back to work." The people had their own ways of drawing, heads of families first, then heads of households in each family. Mr. Summers began by calling names alphabetically, and as he called each name, the head of the family went forward and took a slip of paper from the box. Some joking passed through the crowd, but there was a hint of nervousness underneath. When it was Bill Hutchinson's turn, he stepped forward, took a slip, and stood silently with the paper in hand. The Hutchinsons' late arrival had attracted attention, and Tessie Hutchinson, Bill's wife, had playfully protested. "Wouldn't have me leave my dishes in the sink, now would you, Joe?" Mr. Summers' response was curt. They had to follow the rules of the lottery. Finally, all the papers were drawn, and Mr. Summers instructed the people. "All right, folks, open your papers." The villagers obeyed, and a sigh of relief went through the crowd, and everyone found a blank slip, except for Bill Hutchinson. Bill held his paper tightly, displaying the slip with a black dot for everyone to see. A sudden silence filled the square. Tessie, realizing what had happened, screamed, "You didn't give him enough time to take any paper he wanted! It wasn't fair!" Her protests went unanswered as Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves moved quickly to draw 5 slips for the final round among the Hutchinsons. The Hutchinson children were called forward, little Davy, then Nancy, and Bill Jr., each holding a slip. As they opened their papers, they found them blank, until only Tussie was left holding the marked paper. "It isn't right! It isn't fair!" Tessie shrieked, but the crowd ignored her, murmuring to each other as they began to reach for the stones collected earlier by the children. The first stone struck her side, thrown by a neighbor who quickly averted his eyes, followed by another and then another, until her cries were drowned out by the collective sound of the stones hitting flesh. The villagers closed in, their expressions a mix of duty and uneasy resignation as they completed the ancient ritual, one that was necessary to ensure a good harvest, as tradition held. When it was over, the square was quiet again. The villagers went back to their homes and their fields, the summer air still bright and warm, leaving behind only the remnants of the ritual that bound them all. If you were one of those villagers, would you be able to go along with the lottery because it was tradition? If not, how would you dare to change it? And how important is it to you? Some things linger in the dark, waiting for those who are foolish enough to call them, like in this story written by Sara Lukasiewicz. Everyone warned her not to try it, but that only made it harder for Gina to resist. It had started as a dare from her best friend, Claire, on a late October night. Gina's parents were out of town, and she'd invited Claire over to shake up the usual routine. They'd burned through a couple of horror movies when Claire leaned in with a grin and whispered, "Have you ever heard of the closet game?" Gina rolled her eyes, expecting a campfire story, but as Claire explained the rules, Gina felt an unease settle over her. "Stand in a closet, turn off the lights, and hold a match," Claire said, her voice lowering, as if the walls might be listening. "Then you say, 'Show me the light or leave me in darkness.' If you hear whispering, you have to light the match immediately. And whatever you do, if you make it out, never look inside that closet again." Part of Gina wanted to laugh, but the darker, curious part of her was intrigued. She pictured herself standing there, the air around her thick with silence, and her heart gave a heavy thud. When Claire left that night, Gina tried to forget about it, but in the silent house, the challenge lingered, daring her. Just one match, she told herself. One moment alone in the dark. The closet she chose was in her parents' room, the one they rarely used. The door creaked as she opened it, and a stale, earthy smell filled the air, like dust and faint mothballs. It was deeper than her own closet, dark and heavy with shadows that clung to the walls. Heart pounding, she took a shaky breath and stepped inside, pulling the door shut behind her. Instantly, the blackness was so complete she felt like she'd been swallowed whole. She ran her fingers over the cool, thin matchstick in her hand, thumb hovering over the tip. There was a thick silence pressing in, broken only by her breath, which sounded unnaturally loud. She whispered, "Show me the light, or leave me in darkness." She counted each heartbeat, feeling the air grow colder. Nothing happened. Then, from somewhere deep in the closet, she heard it, a faint, unintelligible whisper. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. Was it words? No, she told herself, just nerves. The whispering grew louder, filling the small space, each murmur just out of reach. She felt her skin prickle, and a surge of panic rising as her mind told her to strike the match. Her thumb slipped over the matchstick, struggling to grip it as her hand began to shake. At last, she struck the match, and a small, trembling flame flared to life, illuminating the shadowed walls. The whispering stopped, the air still pressing in on her. She held her breath, trapped in the circle of dim light, afraid to move. The flame flickered, casting erratic shadows against the walls. Her heart pounded as the match burned lower, the heat creeping close to her fingers. She forced herself to let it drop, the flame sputtering out in the darkness. The spell of silence seemed to lift as she shoved the door open and burst out of the closet, stumbling into the hallway. She looked back, half expecting something to leap out at her, but the closet sat still and empty. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing in her chest. It was over, she told herself, just a silly game. But that night, she couldn't shake the feeling of something watching her. Shadows seemed to pull in every corner, lingering as if they'd grown heavy with intent. She found herself glancing over her shoulder, shivering as the air in the house seemed to grow colder. The unease grew over the days that followed. Every time she walked past her parents' room, her eyes flicked to the closet door, feeling its presence in her periphery, dark and waiting. She heard soft creaks in the walls, low whispers that dissolved into silence, and every so often, the sound of faint breathing that wasn't her own. One night, as she lay in bed, something creaked. She felt a chill crawl over her. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. It was the closet door, slowly easing open. Gina told herself not to move, to ignore it, but the silence pressed down, and her curiosity burned hotter than her fear. She threw back the covers, her body moving almost as if on its own, and walked slowly down the hall. Her parents' door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open wider and stepped inside. Her gaze landed on the closet, its door just slightly open, a sliver of darkness peeking out like a secret. For a long moment, she hesitated, hand hovering in midair. The silence was thick with anticipation. She told herself to turn back, to leave it alone, but her fingers brushed the closet door, pushing it open just a little bit. She peered inside, her breath shallow. At first, there was nothing, just the same stale smell and rows of shadows clinging to the walls. Then, out of the darkness, she saw a figure, crouched low in the corner, pale and twisted with long fingers curling against the walls. Its eyes were wide and hollow, its mouth stretched into a smile that was almost inviting. It tilted its head, watching her, and the hair on the back of her neck stood up with a deep, primal fear. Her mouth opened in a scream that died on her lips. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut with trembling hands, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. But the silence pressed in again. It wasn't gone. She could feel it still, the soft rustle of movement, the feeling of something hungry, waiting. She bolted down the hall, her own breath catching as she slammed her bedroom door, pressing her back against it. But the shadows moved, sliding under the door, pulling around her feet like dark, oily water. She clenched her eyes shut, but the whispers filled her mind, taunting, coaxing. When she opened her eyes, she was still in her room, and the shadows were gone. But she knew it was only a matter of time. The house felt smaller, heavier, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for her to return to the closet. She held out for days, but the need to see it, to know if it was real, grew stronger. Finally, late one night, she couldn't resist any longer. She took a match, her last one, and crept back down the hall. The closet was open, just a sliver. Gina's hand shook as she opened the door fully. The darkness yawned before her, deep and endless. She whispered a final prayer and struck the match. The light barely reached the figure this time, a twisted shape crouched in the darkness. Its wide eyes caught the light, reflecting a cold, hungry gleam as it reached toward her with a slow, deliberate grin. The flame sputtered and went out. The door closed, sealing her scream in the black. The next morning, her parents returned to an empty house. No trace of Gina remained, except for a burnt match on the closet floor. It said if you stand there and listen, you can still hear her whispers, pleading for light in the darkness. What would you do if you heard a voice in the dark, calling your name? When you hear whispers in the dark, can you trust your instincts, or does curiosity lead you to danger? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sara Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman.